Joining me right now is Kentucky Congressman, House Select Committee member and House Foreign Affairs Committee member Andy Barr. Congressman, thanks very much for being here. What is this obsession with walking on eggshells around communist China from this administration?
Well, good morning, Maria. And first of all, happy Veterans Day weekend to all of our veterans out there watching. And a special happy Veterans Day to my good friend, Colonel Brad Wenstrup, my colleague who just announced his retirement from the Congress. His service to the country will continue. But, Maria, to your question about the upcoming summit between President Biden and General Secretary Xi, you know, Ronald Reagan had a foreign policy, peace through strength. It seems that President Biden's strategy with respect to the Chinese Communist Party is appeasement, seeking upfront concessions, and a zombie engagement approach without any real strength at all. And weakness invites aggression. And you're exactly right. You listed the laundry list of concessions where there's no consequences for bad behavior from the CCP, whether it's a spy balloon, whether it's provocative maneuvers in the South China Sea with our U.S. Navy, whether it is incursions in the air defense identification zone over Taiwan, whether it is sending over to the United States precursors for fentanyl, the failure to sanction any of the Hong Kong officials who have cracked down on pro-democracy activists or in Xinjiang. You know, it's been, Maria, 2 years since this administration has imposed any new export controls, 2 years since they have imposed any new sanctions on outbound investment. And look, we appreciate the fact that the administration has announced some restrictions on investments, but that only applies to U.S. citizens. And that's why I've introduced a bill to impose tough sanctions to prevent us from unwittingly financing the rise of the Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah, I mean, what is this administration so afraid of with regard to China? I mean, Yellen's talks today with the China vice premier come ahead of this meeting between President Biden and Chinese leader Xi Jinping. We have just gotten the official word that the meeting will, in fact, take place. It's official now. We've been talking about it all week, but it is official that it will happen this Wednesday in San Francisco, Biden and Xi Jinping. Republicans on the House Select Committee on China wrote a letter to the president about this, urging him to raise the important issues with Xi Jinping, saying don't continue the repeated concessions to China. Congressman Barr, you signed that letter. It includes 10 demands that you suggest Biden make of Xi Jinping before the end of the APEC summit. Tell us about those demands. What's most important that Joe Biden bring up to Xi Jinping in your view?
Well, I think, number one, the People's Liberation Navy needs to stop harassing our ally, the Filipinos, in the South China Sea and engaging in dangerous maneuvers with U.S. naval aircraft. I was there in the Philippines just in August in a bipartisan delegation, and we were aboard one of those U.S. naval aircrafts, and the Chinese are engaging in attempted hostilities with our Navy. So that's number one. Number two is we need to make sure that there is a cessation of hostilities with respect to our ally, the democracy in Taiwan. There has been an uptick in the tempo, the operational tempo of the People's Liberation aircraft with respect to incursions into Taiwan airspace. That's unacceptable. And what we're seeing for the first time, Maria, is many of the Chinese aircraft on the eastern side of Taiwan. So they are preparing for a blockade of Taiwan. On the economic competition front, we see no consequences for the bad behavior, the theft of the intellectual property, the trade, unfair trade practices, the exploitation of our capital markets. And so what we need to do is the president needs to show real consequences, not just this listing of Chinese military-industrial complex companies, but real consequences, meaning sanctions that have a multilateral effect, not just restrictions on U.S. investment into China, but multilateral sanctions for Chinese military and surveillance companies that threaten our national security.
Yeah, I'm not optimistic that any of that comes up. I mean, honestly, you know, right in the middle of this war on Israel, China is clearly supporting Iran. And Iran's foreign minister reportedly is warning of an expansion of the Israel-Hamas war. and it has become inevitable, quote unquote, is what he said. The Pentagon now confirms that at least 56 service members have been injured from a total of 46 attacks on U.S. bases in the Middle East in less than a month. Congressman Barr, what should the response be to attacks on our military forces since October 7th? And you see what's taking place here.
Well, once again, it is the Biden administration's foreign policy of weakness that has led to this invasion, this barbaric invasion of Israel by the terrorist proxy Hamas. Why? Because the Biden administration has been chasing sanctions relief and, in fact, has delivered sanctions relief to the mullahs in Tehran, which has enabled them to finance Hamas and Hezbollah in this barbaric attack against our key ally, the democracy in Israel. And so, number one, reverse course, reverse their bad policy of chasing a new nuclear deal with Iran that has financed this war against Israel, and restore the maximum pressure campaign that the Trump administration so successfully waged and limited Iran's capabilities of supporting this kind of terrorist activity. Also, no ceasefire in Hamas. Prime Minister Netanyahu is absolutely right. A ceasefire would be tantamount to a surrender to the terrorists. It would allow them to reconstitute and attack again. And Israel should deserve credit for providing a humanitarian corridor to allow innocent Palestinians and others to leave Gaza, but they cannot let up right now. We need to give Israel the time and space to do the operations they need to bring to justice these terrorists and also to free the terrorists. Maria, if I could say one more thing about China. If I could say one more thing about China ahead of this APEC summit, very important. In the Select Committee, I asked Assistant Secretary Crittenbrink of the State Department whether or not the Biden administration had communicated, whether the State Department had communicated to Treasury or the Commerce Department to delay implementation of sanctions or delay implementation of export controls over these last 2 years in order to chase diplomacy and show weakness to China. And he would not answer the question, which tells me that, in fact, that's what the State Department has done. Deliberately project weakness to the Chinese Communist Party, delaying sanctions, delaying export controls in hopes of achieving some kind of diplomatic breakthrough. And now we hear that Secretary Granholm has invited the Chinese to come observe some of our sensitive nuclear sites in the United States. This is outrageous. And this kind of weakness is directly threatening our national security.
Absolutely. This is outrageous. Why would she invite the Chinese to inspect our nuclear facilities? And all this time of them talking tough, they're actually delaying the sanctions. Why? Because the CCP is obviously threatening they want these sanctions delayed, and they're doing what the Chinese said.
Right. So whether it's Afghanistan, the retreat in Afghanistan, whether it is weakness on Iran, whether it is weakness on China, this administration's foreign policy is dangerous. It's dangerous. It's threatened our national security, and weakness invites aggression. It invited it into Ukraine. It invited it with Hamas. It's inviting it with Beijing today. And we need to reverse course quickly before we invite a war.
We hope it's not too late. Congressman, it's been an incredibly impactful 2.5 years under Biden and his administration. Congressman, thank you. We'll be watching your work. We appreciate your time. We'll be right back.
Thank you.